is the Hood Rat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. We're now joined by a special guest, Rebecca Lynne. You are a local kind of a parent advocate for LGBTQ students here in the Kalamazoo area. I know you helped start like a kind of support group, Facebook page. Have you on here because this next topic of discussion, I've seen you talking a little bit about it online, and this is also, while it is local to Michigan, it's also happening in a lot of different places in the country. There's a new piece of legislation the Michigan GOP is trying to push through, basically ban trans athletes at the high school, middle school level. We've also seen similar bills in places like South Dakota, where it is, in South Dakota, it's actually much more likely to pass. The governor very grossly talked about being excited to pass it. So before we get your response, could you maybe tell the listeners a little bit about like, how did you get involved in this advocacy? I know there's this whole story about the curriculum going back about a year or so ago. And then after that, maybe just give us your reaction when you heard about this news about what's going through the legislature.
Sure. So I am a mom of 4 children, and my oldest child is trans, but they're like 25. So I've been kind of, they've been teaching me for a long time, just about trans rights and trans exclusion culturally and things like that. So I guess for a long time it's been kind of something that I've more witnessed maybe than been a part of, like as far as advocacy around it. But then I also have a school age child now, so 2 of my 4 who is trans. And so last year, 2019 school year, something, I had heard something just, at the bus stop about LGBT books with any kind of LGBT content being excluded from the KPS libraries. So I went to BookBug and bought some books and posted it online to my Facebook friends, like, hey, I bought these for the school because of this. And suddenly, like within a couple of weeks, we had like 600 people in this Facebook group, like advocating for inclusion of LGBTQ materials in KPS. So that effort has, and that was a fantastic, like that was great. Although we haven't really seen a lot of the positive outcomes from it because we haven't been in school, like because of the pandemic also. And we have a new superintendent and so on. So there's a lot of work still to do there, but so so that's kind of where my advocacy started, really more publicly. And I've only been a KPS mom for a couple of years anyway, so I'm kind of still figuring out the system myself here. So, as part of that, I've really, I follow the news a lot, and, obviously because of my own child, because we're looking toward puberty and blockers and things like that. So this is something I just pay a lot of attention to and read about a lot. And so I've been watching all of these bills being forwarded all over the country. These trans exclusion bills, surrounding sports specifically, although, there's really, it's really kind of part of a bigger push toward, criminalizing trans bodies. There are some really positive things happening, and we see this a lot with civil rights. There's some positive things happening, just this week in North Carolina. They passed a state law that all of the schools have to use preferred names, not legal names for trans children in the school documents, other than the official state record. So, there are some positive things like that around trans rights of school children. But then there's all of this like criminalization of trans bodies going on at the same time. So I've been kind of watching this, and it's so hurtful. It's so hurtful, like all of the rhetoric around it, and just all of the things that we're seeing online, and the comments, which are, you should never read the comments, but it's just really hateful. But then yesterday when I saw that the bill was introduced in Michigan, it was, I mean, honestly, tears and anger were just like angry tears was my, reaction. It's unfathomable to me that the Republican, senators are politicizing, our children's bodies in this way, and using this for, and we know that it's not going to be, it's not just, even though it's very unlikely to pass in Michigan, the fact that it was introduced, and it's being introduced in, I think, more than 25 states this year, this legislation, similar legislation has been introduced. And in Mississippi, it was actually signed into law today. The fact that, like, even if, like, I don't think Whitmer would ever sign it, right? It's not going to become law here. However, like, the harmful rhetoric and all of the collateral damage that is going to happen to our children and all trans individuals, not just school age kids, but just like that hateful, harmful rhetoric that's going to happen over the next 2 years, at least, because we know this is like the goal of like energizing the Republican base for the midterms, right? Gaining women, the suburban women voters back. Like, I think it's not just the bill itself. It's thinking about, we watched everything around like build the wall, and we watched all of the anti-Black sentiment, right? We've seen this over a couple of election cycles, and how people's identities are used as weapons. And so to be looking ahead to the next 2 years, knowing that these vulnerable, marginalized trans children are being weaponized, is just like, I really can't even describe like the emotion and the, that I feel. It's hard to deal with as a mom who wants to protect a child,
I think you bring up such a critical point. We spent some time earlier in the show talking about media and how we're seeing a resurgence of some silly cultural war issues like Pepe Le Pew or Dr. Seuss. But there is one avenue of this, and I think you really had to stay on the head, that it does have a tremendous amount of very human collateral damage. And I just want to kind of pick your brain. Why do you think, we're now in this kind of off year where those reactionary folks, they're not currently in power, but they've really chosen to plant their flag in, being cruel to trans people as this cultural issue. And we've seen this before. But pre-Trump, all the rhetoric about bathroom bills and such. Why do you think they're choosing this particular scapegoat right now, and what kind of fear does that bring to you as a parent who's going to be raising a child in this kind of heated cultural war environment?
So, I mean, I don't know exactly why trans children are the ones they have chosen, except for that, like the Republicans have really bled those white suburban voters, like women specifically. And I think, so they are really using this, it's a very turfy thing, right? So this is, the way that they are using this issue is by saying that, they're protecting women's rights by not allowing trans women to play on these sports teams, right? So like they, in order to win back white women, suburban, voters, they're that's how they're packaging all of this. So, that's their strategy. And, you know, I mean, I think it speaks to a lot of people in their base who don't really have any understanding of, trans kids or trans people. You know, and you see, people like Nikki Haley, and what's that, Marjorie Taylor Greene, like they are, that's, the bandwagon they're getting on is, women's rights.
The the
So
QAnon the QAnon believers that don't really
right,
know anything about anything.
right. So, for me, I think what scares me about this most is that we know, like, when this rhetoric really is latched onto, right, and violence follows, right? So exclusion is one piece of it, and it won't be on sports teams. It'll be exclusion that we see in other parts of our public life, right, as a result. But also violence. I mean, we've already had 10 trans people murdered this year that we know of, and it's only the beginning of March. And I just see, like, you know, when I think about these people, it's not even an issue, right? It's not an issue for most people. Like, whether or not trans girls are playing on girls' teams, right, is not an issue for most families. It's just not. It's, that's like the thing. It's like, not this, these are not like, children, or families of children who are bringing these lawsuits, right? This is like a top-down thing. Like, most people are, it's just not even, it doesn't impact them. However, it's going to start to be a discussion, right? At many of these, so for those, the QAnon folks, and for all of these Trump supporters and Republicans, it's going to start to be an issue. And as families start to talk about it, and to get, to really have strong opinions that are being fed to them about trans kids and trans identities, I think that will also trickle down to the children. And I think the environments within schools will become more hostile as well, because the children are going to be fed that by their parents. So for me, it's really scary. Like, I think the violence and the increased intolerance and exclusion that will likely result from this being like the issue, that's, I guess, I'm not quite sure how. Yeah, I don't really know how to, like, deal with it, like, as a parent, like, like, I haven't gotten there yet. We're still figuring it all out, as far as just, our own, like, our own policies within our school district, and how things are being handled from classroom to classroom. And, like, okay, how do I deal with reproductive health when that comes up, and so on. So to think about, this being such a polarizing national issue that's going to be, like, so impacting my child, like, I just don't know as a parent how to protect him from that.
Well, I will say, to your immense credit, especially seeing some of the work you and other organizers and concerned parents did last year, I think there's a good starting point. And I think I want to frame this around. It's like, yeah, I know it's really rough, especially to see the way that these twisted media narratives are throwing real, like, people under the bus and making them susceptible to this kind of hateful scapegoating. I'd like to ask, though.
I mean, this is not. I'm sorry to interrupt. Like, this is not the first time we've seen things like this. I mean, we talked about on the show how they tried to change the education curriculum in Kalamazoo when it came to talking about slavery, like how they weren't captured human beings. They were undocumented immigrants or something. Like, they tried to change we've seen this type of changing the narrative or misrepresentation from Republicans and from like-minded people in Michigan. Like, this is not the first time we've seen this. It's not going to be the last. And the misunderstanding of people who are trans or who are transitioning or who are not, but they identify as, are still things that most Americans don't understand. Um, most of, I mean, I'm saying that because I mean, when it comes to just the education around sex or and things of that nature, gender identity, sex, and things of that nature are not discussed freely, and is not discussed in a objective or realistic manner that will help people understand what we're talking about. That doesn't happen on a regular basis, let alone trying to expect parents and teachers to grasp it is a totally different concept.
So I actually wanted to, I wanted to lead that into this might be like kind of our last question. And again, Rebecca, I really want to thank you for taking time out of your day to come on our show to talk about this. But I'm really thinking, especially for some of like the parents and maybe students who might be watching this. I know this is kind of a cliche at this point. We say it on the show. A lot of these things start and end with one-on-one conversations. Um, how would you, as a parent, really like to see both other allies, advocates, talk to other parents about this issue, as well as the students? How should students? How would you like to see students talking to their peers about these issues to at least try to make sure that we have a more positive climate here in the Kalamazoo public school system?
Right. Um, I think it's actually interesting. That's a good question. It's kind of a hard question, honestly. Um, I think that respecting people's identities is like the most basic and important thing, right? And a lot of kids are not figuring it out, right? They're still developing their ideas around their own gender identity. My child came out at 7, one of them, and one of them was like 16 or 18, when they kind of figured that out and were able to express it. So, but but I have friends who have kids who've come out at 5 as trans, right? So it's really important to talk to kids and to other parents early, and um, to respect people's identities, even if even as those change, because they can change a lot as students are and children are growing up. I actually had a memory like pop up in my Facebook or something about, it was actually a conversation over dinner that I had with my trans child, like couple years before he came out even. And he said, he was in kindergarten at the time, and he said that in a private school, and he said that he had learned that day that sometimes girls are born or kids are born with girl's body and a boy's brain, or sometimes they're born with a boy's body and a girl's brain, and that's called transgender. And this is something he learns in kindergarten, in private school. Like, there's no reason that our children can't understand. Like, it doesn't have to be a really big complex topic. We can talk about it in an age appropriate way, and just bring children and other parents into that culture of just understanding that we're not all the same, and that the culture that we were kind of indoctrinated into, right, is like this cis-normative, heteronormative culture, and that we have to kind of put a pause on that and learn to see things in a different way. And that really the first step in that is just having like the most basic respect for people and their rights and their identities. So I don't know.
All right. Well, I don't know. Lawrence, did you have any closing questions before we wrap this up, or?
Mm-mm,
Okay.
not at all.
All right. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for taking time to be on the program. And what's the name of that Facebook group that you facilitate? You're part of?
It's really long. It's like advocating for LGBTQ plus kids in KPS or something, or families and students in KPS. I think that's the name of it, but it's private. You kind of have to know somebody, I think, and be invited to the group. But maybe they can contact you if anybody's listening and wants to be a part of this advocacy effort in KPS, and it's beyond KPS. I mean, we'll be dealing with this legislation and combating it as an advocacy organization also, or as a group, really informal group. But maybe they can contact you, Andy, and, you know, let us know that, and you can contact me, and we'll figure out a way that they can be a part of the effort, because it's, you know, we're stronger together.
Yeah, you heard that, folks. You want to get involved, hit us up and all that stuff. Yeah. Also, podcasts and stuff. All right. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much. Have a blessed day. And thank you so much, Tyra, taking time out of your schedule to talk with us on the program today.
Thank you.